The day the silence ticked. Have you ever noticed how small American towns have a way of keeping secrets? I'm not talking about the kind of gossip you hear over a backyard fence. I'm talking about things that defy physics, things that shouldn't happen in a world governed by logic. My name is James, and I grew up in a place called Darby, West Virginia. In 2004, I was in the 4th grade. What happened on Tuesday, October 12th, was scrubbed from the local papers, but my gums still ache every time I remember that sound. It was a normal math class. Mrs. Gable was writing fractions on the chalkboard. The room was deathly quiet, save for the dry screech of the chalk. And then, click. A small white object landed on the desk in front of my friend, Tommy. It was his front incisor, no blood, no scream. Tommy just stared at it, his mouth hanging open in a hollow O. Then it started happening to everyone. Click, clack, tap, tap, tap. Imagine the sound of a handful of pearls being dropped onto linoleum. For 10 seconds, every kid in that room, all 30 of us, lost 2 or 3 teeth. We sat in absolute shock. Nobody cried. There was no pain, just a sickening sense of emptiness in our mouths and that rhythmic tapping of bone against the floor. The scariest part wasn't the teeth, though. It was Mrs. Gable. She didn't even turn around. She kept drawing a number 8 until the chalk snapped and crumbled into her skin. Then she said, without looking back, "Pick them up. Put them in the blue envelopes under your desks." Not a sound. We obeyed. We were kids, and we were terrified by her mechanical, cold voice. Within 5 minutes, 2 men in gray suits entered with industrial vacuums. They weren't doctors. They didn't ask if we were okay. They just sucked our teeth out of the cracks in the floor. I moved away from Darby a month later. My parents never talked about it. But 3 months ago, after my father passed, I was clearing out the attic. I found a small tin box. Inside was my molar, the one I had secretly tucked into my pocket that day. It wasn't dead. Over 20 years, it had grown a fine, fungus-like fringe of black veins. When I touched it, I felt a vibration, a pulse. Something deep under Darby is still waiting for the rest of that lesson. And judging by how my gums started bleeding this morning, I think it's time to pay the rest of the debt. For a week, Marilyn heard a chilling scratching at her door, but the hallway was always empty. She didn't know the truth. The scratching wasn't coming from the outside. For over a week, Marilyn woke up to a sound that made her blood run cold. A slow, rhythmic scratching on her bedroom door. But every time she threw it open, the hallway was dead silent. Empty. She thought she was being haunted. She was wrong. It happened every night at 1 a.m. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Marilyn would freeze, her heart hammering against her ribs, and eventually she'd find the courage to check. But there was never anyone there. Then, the sound started to move. One night the scratching was at her door, the next, it was further down the hall, then, inside the guest room. She was losing it. The sleep deprivation was rotting her brain. Dark circles, trembling hands. She was desperate. Finally, she told her friend Lori. "I'll stay over," Lori said. "If there's a noise, we'll find the source together." That night they waited. Lori in the guest room, Marilyn in her own bed. At 1 a.m., Lori bolted upright. The house was silent until she heard it. A fast, erratic scratching coming from downstairs. Scritch, scritch, scritch. She grabbed her phone, the flashlight cutting through the pitch-black air, her heart in her throat. She reached the dining room and saw a figure hunched in the corner. She steeled herself and flashed the light. It was Marilyn. She was crouched against the wall, her eyes wide, unblinking, and completely vacant. Marilyn's fingers were moving with terrifying speed, clawing at the drywall until her fingernails were gone. Broken, bleeding. She'd been doing it for hours, leaving long, red streaks on the white paint. She didn't even notice Lori was there. The doctors called it a psychotic break. Months later, she's still in the hospital, staring at the walls, as if waiting for the scratching to start again. Stay safe, because sometimes the monster is you. I've worked search and rescue in the Olympic National Park for 12 years. And if there's one thing you learn, it's that the forest doesn't want to be explored. Most people think getting lost is about lack of water or cold, but they're wrong. The real danger is what happens when you realize you're being watched by something that knows the terrain better than you. 2 years ago, we got a call about a missing hiker, a fit, 24-year-old guy who had done this trail a dozen times. He vanished in a sector we call the Emerald Basin. It's a beautiful place. Everything is covered in thick, neon green moss, but it's dangerously quiet. I was about 4 miles off trail when the woods went dead. No birds, no wind, just a heavy, suffocating silence. I found a clearing, and that's when I saw it. The hiker's backpack, hanging from a branch, 10 feet in the air. It wasn't snagged. It was tied there with professional-grade knots. I called out his name, but my voice felt like it was being swallowed by the moss. Then, I heard a whistle. It was a sharp, 2-tone bird call, but it didn't sound like any bird in Washington state. It sounded like a human trying to mimic a hawk. I pulled my radio, but all I got was a low, rhythmic clicking sound, like someone was tapping on a microphone from the other side. I looked down at the mud near the backpack, and my heart stopped. There were 2 sets of tracks. One was the hiker's boots. The other set was bare feet. Large, distorted human footprints, with toes that looked unnaturally long, almost like they were designed for climbing trees. The tracks circled the hiker's prints for miles, creeping closer, then backing off, then lunging. It was a hunt. I followed the trail to a deep ravine, and that's where I found him. The hiker was sitting at the base of a cedar tree. He looked physically fine, but his eyes, they were completely gone. He was staring into the canopy and whispering the same 3 words over and over. He's still up there. He's still up there. I looked up, and for a split second, I saw him, a figure, draped in layers of matted fur and moss, crouched on a branch 40 feet above us. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't need one. He just sat there watching me with eyes that reflected my flashlight like an animal's. I didn't wait. I grabbed the hiker and we ran. I didn't care about protocol. I just needed to get to the truck. Every few minutes, I'd hear that same human whistle from the trees behind us, moving as fast as we were, but never coming into the light. We made it out, but that hiker never spoke another word of English. He just whistles now. Those same 2 sharp notes every time he sees a tree. Stay out of the Olympic trails, because sometimes the forest doesn't just want you to get lost, it wants to keep a piece of you.